Hi and welcome to the next tutorial. In today's lesson we'll learn how to recreate this real simple animated intro using Adobe After Effects. So anyways guys, let's jump in. So the first thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to create a new composition, and we're just going to run with a 1920 by 1080 pixel document and just press OK. We need to create a new solid so that we can run our gradient ramp effect on. So just search up gradient ramp. And then we need to choose our colors. Now I'm using color hunt for these colors. So all I'm going to do is go to color hunt, find my color scheme, click on the colors, and then go in here and just paste the values. Once you're happy with your colors, you then can change from linear ramp to radial ramp, and then you can just move the start and end points. Now you can play around with this. You can have it set up how you like. So I'm just gonna have a little bit lighter just up there. Cool. So now what we are going to be doing is we are going to be creating a new shape, and we are going to be using the pen tool. Before I get started on that, I'm just going to put the title action safe so I can see the grid. So the first thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to create a new shape layer. And once we've done that, we then need to go and grab the pen tool. Alright, we can change our fill to none. We can set our stroke color to white, and we can set our stroke width to about 5. Then I'm just going to grab the pen tool and I'm just going to zoom in and make sure that I click on that point. And then I'm just going to make sure that I hold shift and click another point up here, and there's my first little line using the pen tool. Now I just need to make sure that that's aligned horizontally, so I can go over to my align tools and make sure that I align it. Now once that's ready to go, we then can move on to the next step. So the next thing that we have to do is we are going to open up our shape layer, and we are going to add a repeater. So we're going to go over here, add a repeater, and you can see that already that there's 3 copies over here. So we're going to open up the repeater values, we're going to open up the transform values, and we're going to change a few things. Firstly, we're going to change this position. We're going to set it to 0. And then what we are going to do is we are going to go over here to the anchor point, and we're going to increase that up to about 40. We then need to also increase the rotation. So now you can see that everything is starting to come around. So once you've done that, then all you need to do is you need to increase the copies. And so if you've done that correctly, then you will get all of these kind of lines coming out from this kind of circle thing in the middle. So before you do anything, you will need to go over here and click on the pan behind tool, and we want to move this anchor point. Now you can do it manually, but it's not going to be that great. So what you need to do is hold control and double click on that, and there it's automatically gone into the middle of that shape. And I'm just going to drag it up until that center point is there. Cool. So now once you've done that, the next thing that you will need to do is you will need to add some trim paths. So if you go back into your shape layer and go to trim path, now we can go and we can start to play around with some of these settings. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to drop the end to 0, and then we're just going to drop this comp area actually to probably about 5 seconds. So we're going to trim comp to work area. And then we're going to set up some keyframes. So we're going to set up a keyframe here and here at 0%. We're going to move forward in time, and then I'm just going to increase them both to 100%. And so now nothing really happens, but what we are going to do is we are just going to stagger these keyframes. So we're just going to move it over in time, a few frames. Maybe I'm just going to move this one back as well. So now if you've done that correctly, you can see that we've got a burst happening, and that's looking pretty good. So the next thing that we can do to these keyframes is we can go in here, we can right click, and we can make sure that they are easy eased keyframes. And so I'm just going to move this down. So 1 second is going to be the end of this burst. And so what this does is it smooths out the animation, but we're going to smooth it out even more by going into the graph editor and then clicking on these 2 points, and we're just going to bring that all the way to the middle, and we're going to do the same for the other side. Now make sure when you're in the graph editor, you're on the speed graph. So now what it looks like is there's a bit of an acceleration. It starts off slow and then it really ramps up and then it falls back down again. So that's looking really, really good for our circle burst. So we're just going to rename that shape layer and we're going to call it circle burst. So now we're going to add the next two circles. So they're quite easy to do. We're just going to grab a new shape layer and we're going to do the same process again. We're going to come up here, we're going to grab the ellipse tool, and I'm just going to hold shift and draw a circle. And so once you've got your circle, I'm just going to align it to the center of my document. Now with the circles, I'm going to start to increase the stroke. So the fill is still going to be none, but the stroke, I'm going to bring it up to 15. The next thing that we need to do is a very similar process. We need to come over here and we need to add a trim path. And we're going to repeat that same process that we did for the circle burst. So we're going to come over here, we're going to set them both to 0. We're going to set 2 keyframes, and then we're going to come back over here and we're going to set this one to 100 and this one also to 100, and then we are going to move it over slightly. So we'll go maybe something like that, and this one I'm just going to bring it back like that. So now you can see that there's only a chunk of the circle that goes around, and the more that you play with the start and end settings, the more visible that chunk is. So if I increase that, the end time, you can see that it's nearly a semicircle. So there's a lot of options you can do to play with some of these settings. But anyways, once you're happy with your settings, you then need to again go into easy ease, and then we can go back into our graph editor and we can have a play around with some of these settings. So we're just going to grab them from both sides and we're just going to have that peak in the middle, and we're going to do the same for this one as well. So now when we play that back, it looks like that, and that's pretty cool. So we're going to call that shape layer, we'll call it circle 1. So now we're going to do the same thing again, but this time we are going to lower the stroke. So we just need to duplicate this circle. So you can press Ctrl D on your keyboard to duplicate. I'm just going to bring up the scale and I'm just going to scale this down. You can press S for scale. And this time the stroke is going to be 15. And now if I press U on my keyboard, I can play around with some of these settings. So you can see that there now we've got 2 circles that wrap around at the same time, and that looks pretty good. But you know what, we can change some of these settings so they look a little bit different. So now I've got like a shorter path that follows that circle. But another thing that we can do to this is we can start to add a rotation. So if we press R on our keyboard, set a keyframe at the start, and we're just going to move it forward in time. Maybe we'll go up to 2. And so now if we play that back, you can see that the inner circle is rotating much faster than the outer circle, and that's looking pretty good. And you can also easy ease these keyframes as well. So now we move up to the final thing, which is to add our rectangle and our text. So again, to do that, it's not that difficult. All we have to do is go up to a new shape layer, and we're just going to grab the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle here. Now I don't need a stroke, so I'm just going to disable that, but the fill, I'll need to get the color, and I'm going to be using this color here. So I'm just going to fill that with that green color, and then I'm just going to align it to my page. But I just need to make sure that the pan behind tool is in the middle, which it is. So now once we've got our rectangle shape, we need to add some text. So I'm just going to come over here, click some text, and then click anywhere on the screen. So now I can write whatever I like. So once you have your text and it's ready to go, I then can just go over here to my line tools, and just align it vertically and horizontally. So now I'm just going to play around with the shape layer slightly, just so it's a little bit bigger than the actual text, and you can increase the size of the text if you want. So now once we have our text and our rectangle, what we can apply is a drop shadow to the text and the actual rectangle. So what you need to do is search up drop shadow and then drag it to your shape layer and increase the distance to probably about 15. And that's looking pretty good, and you can also drag it to the actual text, but the text we only want to add a distance of probably about 10. So now that's looking very nice, the text stands out, so we can move to the next phase. The next thing that we have to do is we just need to scale this up in time with the rest of the animation. So we're going to right click on both of these layers, and we are just going to right click and then pre-compose. We're just going to leave it and call it pre-comp, and now what we can do is we can scale them both up at the same time by pressing S on our keyboard. So what we are going to do is we are going to set an animation for the scale, and then we're just going to move it forward in time to about 1 second, and then we are going to just bring it down to 0. So now if we play that back, you can see that the text and rectangle are both coming in together at the same time, and that's looking pretty good. So what we need to do there is we just need to make sure that we easy ease these keyframes, and then we go to our graph editor and we just do the same thing what we did before, and we just create that kind of curve in the middle. So now when we play that back, it's a bit more snappy, and that's pretty good. So the final thing we need to do is we need to do the scale the opposite way. So I'm just going to move forward probably about 10 frames, and I'm just going to increase that size to about 105, and then probably about at the 2-second mark I'm just going to bring it back down to 0. And so now the animation comes in and then it goes out, but we need to increase the acceleration here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the graph editor, grab this side and then bring it over, and then also grab this side and bring that over, just so it's got that snappiness, and that's looking really, really good. So the final thing that you need to do is you just need to start worrying about the timing of all of these objects. So the circle burst, I probably want to start when it's, you know, probably around about, maybe about there. So I'm just going to press U on my keyboard to bring up the keyframes, and I'm just going to highlight everything with the keyframes, and I'm just going to move it forward in time. So now I've got the circle burst happening after the 2 circles have rotated. Actually, I'm just going to bring it to about 10 frames. So I'm going to highlight that again and just move it over. So now that's looking pretty good. So the final thing I want to do is I just want to increase the scale of the circle burst, and so I'm going to bring it up to maybe about, I don't know, 240, something like that. So now when I play that back, it's just a little bit bigger. And so that's about it for the animation. The last thing that I did is I just applied a motion blur to all of my graphics, and then I just rendered it out. So anyways guys, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something in this tutorial, and I will see you guys next time.